We are now live on YouTube. Hello everyone, and welcome to a musical celebration of the 9th day of Riḍván. Thank you for tuning in. It is really lovely to be connected with you all. I see people saying hello from all over the world on the YouTube chat. Please do say hello in the YouTube chat and let everyone know where you're watching from, because it's so lovely to know that people are tuning in from different parts of the world to celebrate this special day together. So we're here to celebrate this beautiful 9th day of the festival of Riḍván, which, as many of you will know, is a very significant day in the history of the Baha'i faith. And I'm sure that many of you have been celebrating the festival of Riḍván already for the past 8.5 days, in which case I wish you happy Riḍván. I hope it's been a very joyful, happy occasion for you. But for anybody who's watching who is perhaps not familiar with the festival of Riḍván, Riḍván means paradise. And the festival of Riḍván is really the biggest festival of the year that is celebrated every year by Baha'is around the world. And it's the most joyful celebration of the year because it marks essentially the moment that the Baha'i faith began, when in 1863, the founder of the Baha'i faith, Bahá'u'lláh, announced that he was the promised one awaited by the religions of the world, and that he had come to bring a message of unity. And so this day, this announcement, is celebrated every year as a festival. But this festival of Riḍván actually goes on for 12 days, from April 21st to May 2nd. So it's a 12-day celebration of those beginning moments of the Baha'i faith. And the 9th day of this festival has a particularly special significance for historical reasons. And the 9th day is especially associated with family. And so I'm going to touch on this theme of family throughout this live stream, because we're going to go on a little bit of a musical journey and a musical exploration of the meaning and significance and the story behind the 9th day of Riḍván. So before we do that, I just wanted to explain a little bit about what I'm going to do. I'm going to sing a selection of songs that are all based on prayers and passages that I've set to music from the Baha'i sacred writings. So these are really kind of meditative, prayerful pieces. And I hope that we can see this next hour as less of a concert and more of a kind of a sort of a reflective, meditative respite from all the cares of the day. And I hope that wherever you're watching from, I hope that you're able to just take a little break from the busyness of life and spend a little bit of time over the coming hour just to reflect through music and storytelling on the importance of giving a little bit of attention to our spiritual lives, which I often think are so intertwined with our family lives that we can scarcely overestimate how much one influences the other. So I'd like to begin with one of my favorite prayers, just to set the tone for this journey that we're going to go on. But before I do that, I just wanted to mention, I know that many of you are aware of this already, for these 12 days of the Festival of Riḍván this year, I'm hosting a daily online meeting on Zoom called Garden of Paradise. And Garden of Paradise is a very simple daily Zoom meeting where it's a public open meeting where anyone can come into the Zoom meeting, and anyone is welcome to read a prayer or sing a song or share an inspirational reading of your own choice. It's open to all. And that's happening every day, actually twice a day for about 20 minutes each time, at 3 p.m. and 8 p.m. Irish time. And so the next Garden of Paradise Zoom gathering is going to be immediately after this live stream. So at the end of the live stream, I'm just going to move over to the Zoom meeting. And I just wanted to say, if anyone would like to join me, you're more than welcome to come into the Zoom meeting with me, and we can have 20 minutes more of songs or prayers or whatever you'd like to share in there. So I'll let you know once the live stream is finished. I'll switch over to Zoom and I'll let you know where the link is if you'd like to come with me. But in the meantime, we're going to set out on this musical journey, and I hope that it gives you a little respite from the troubles and cares of the world. I'd like to begin with this prayer written by Bahá'u'lláh which I've set to music and is called Create in Me a Pure Heart. Create in me a pure heart, oh my God, oh my God, and renew a tranquil conscience within me, oh my hope, through the Spirit of power, confirm thou me in thy cause. Oh, my best beloved, confirm thou me in thy cause, and by the light of thy glory reveal unto me thy path. By the light of thy glory reveal unto me thy path. O thou, the goal of my desire, and through the power of thy transcendent might, lift me up unto the heaven of thy holiness, O source of my being, and by the breezes of thine eternity gladden me, O thou who art my God. Let thine everlasting melodies breathe tranquility on me, O my companion. Let the riches of thine ancient countenance deliver me from all except thee, O my Master, O my Master, and let the tidings of the revelation of thine incorruptible essence bring me joy. O thou who art the most manifest of the manifest, and the most hidden of the hidden, the most manifest of the manifest, and the most hidden of the hidden of the hidden of the hidden. Okay, so with this theme of family in mind on this 9th day of Riḍván, I wanted to begin by just actually sharing with you a little bit of my own personal family history, just as a way to feel personally connected with the story and the meaning of the 9th day of Riḍván. And I hope that this maybe inspires you to think about what the 9th day of Riḍván means to you and what family means to you. And I hope this just inspires some personal reflection on this theme for all of us. So when I was in my teenage years here in Ireland, my brother Mike, who's a couple of years older than me, came of age, and he packed up and he set out into the world for the adventures of his life. He moved across the water to Scotland, and he went to university in Glasgow. And he spent about 5 years living and studying and working in Glasgow. And about halfway through those 5 years, my brother called home to tell the family that he had through a group of friends that he had met in Glasgow, he had come in contact with what seemed to be a kind of slightly obscure new religion called the Baha'i faith. And he had not only been studying this religion, but he had actually embraced it and had become a Baha'i. And the family were all terribly surprised, because almost nobody in the family had ever even heard of the Baha'i faith. I myself had never even heard the word Baha'i before. But the one person, as far as I knew at the time, the one person in our family who had heard of the Baha'i faith was our mother. And the reason that our mother knew about the Baha'i faith was because many years previously, long before my brother and I had been born, our mother, in her own student days, had set out on her own adventures. And she had gone on an epic journey by boat across the Mediterranean Sea. She had travelled along the coasts of Italy and Greece and Turkey, and had travelled all the way to the far eastern corner of the Mediterranean Sea, when her boat finally pulled in to the city of Haifa in modern-day Israel. And you may know that Haifa is a port city that is built up around one of the most spiritually iconic mountains in the world, Mount Carmel. And Mount Carmel is, of course, a mountain that is revered both by Christians as the mountain where Christ walked, and also by Jews as the place where the prophet Elijah dwelt in his cave. And in the ancient Jewish scriptures, Mount Carmel is described in these really extraordinary terms as this mysterious place of great spiritual significance for the future of the world. Well, when my mother stepped off the boat in Haifa, by that time, Mount Carmel, through a series of extraordinarily dramatic historic events that had happened over the previous 200 years, involving the collapses of empires and the disintegration of monarchies and the fall of many world leaders, all these dramatic historical events had caused Mount Carmel to somewhat providentially become the world center of the Baha'i faith. And the whole mountain was by this time being transformed and cultivated into beautiful gardens, terraced gardens cascading down the slopes of the mountain. And within those gardens, amidst a corridor of beautiful dark green cypress trees and bright red beds of geraniums, there is a little gathering of 4 marble monuments on the slopes of the mountain. And those 4 monuments mark the resting places of the wife, the daughter, one of the sons, and the daughter-in-law of Bahá'u'lláh, the founder of the Baha'i faith. And my mother, getting off her boat, climbed up Mount Carmel and walked around those gardens and visited that sacred place as a tourist. unaware that many years later, her as yet unborn sons would also walk through those gardens and pay homage to that family who now rest on the slopes of Mount Carmel. So I'd actually like to now sing some words about Mount Carmel and about its significance. And these are some words that Bahá'u'lláh wrote about the connection between Mount Carmel as this place of great spiritual significance in the spiritual life of mankind, and the extraordinary time that we all now live in, this time when almost miraculously we can actually celebrate the 9th day of Riḍván together, live on YouTube from across the planet, almost as if we're in the same room. It's quite extraordinary. So I would like to sing these words of Bahá'u'lláh about the greatness of the day and age in which we live and the significance of Mount Carmel. This is an extract from a piece called The Tablet of Carmel by Bahá'u'lláh. All glory be to this day. All glory be to this day. A day in which the fragrances of mercy have been wafted over all created things. A day so blessed that past ages and centuries can never hope to rival it. A day in which the countenance of the Ancient of Days hath turned towards his holy seat. Thereupon the voices of all created things, and beyond them the concourse on high, were heard calling aloud, haste thee, O Carmel, for lo, the light of the countenance of God, the ruler of the kingdom of names, and fashioner of the heavens, hath been lifted upon thee. So, the significance of this 9th day of Riḍván is that this was a day in which these members of Baha'u'llah's family, who now rest in the gardens on the slopes of Mount Carmel, were reunited with Bahá'u'lláh after a period in which they had become temporarily separated from him due to circumstances beyond their control. And so what I'd like to do is I'd like to actually sing a few songs in honour of these members of Baha'u'llah's family and share a few stories and recollections about them. And hopefully, by getting to know them a little bit better, it will it will help us to get a deeper sense of the meaning and significance of the ninth day of Riḍván. So, one of the family members who rests on Mount Carmel that I would like to share a little bit about with you is, of course, Baha'u'llah's wife, whose name was Asiya Khanum, but to whom Baha'u'lláh gave a very special name, Nawab, which means noble. And what was so special about this name that he gave her, it's really a title, really, Nawab, the noble one, is that this title in society at that time, in 19th century Persian society, this title, the noble one, was a name that was only ever given to men. And so, in giving this name to his wife, by calling her the noble one, Nawab, Baha'u'lláh was making a very bold social statement, and in a way he was paving the way for drastic changes that were going to take place in the social relationships between men and women over the coming decades and centuries. And there are some beautiful recollections that have been recorded about Nawab that were recorded by her and Baha'u'llah's daughter, Bahi'a Khanum, who I'll share a little bit more about with you later. You'll also notice this name Khanum is often attached to women's names in Persian culture. In the Persian language, Khanum is really a term of respect that is used in addressing women. It's almost probably some kind of equivalent to how in English we might use the word madam. Asiya Khanum, Bahi'a Khanum. And so their daughter, Bahi'a Khanum, left these beautiful memoirs about her mother, specifically during the early years of her marriage to Baha'u'lláh. Both Nawab and Baha'u'lláh had been born into great wealth and nobility. Both of their families were members of the elite, upper-class Persian aristocracy. And Bahi'a Khanum describes in her memoirs how strange it was that even in the early years of their marriage, these two newlyweds, who were expected to follow the social expectations of their family and to live a life of great prestige and wealth and luxury, separate from the lower classes of society, how strange it was that these two newlyweds essentially turned their backs on all that prestige and fame that would have been theirs, and formed this dynamic partnership dedicated to helping the poor in their hometown. And so I'd like to just share with you some of Bahi'a Khanum's memories of her mother. Even in the early years of their married life, they, my father and mother, took part as little as possible in state functions, social ceremonies, and the luxurious habits of ordinary, highly placed and wealthy families in the land of Persia. She and her noble-hearted husband counted these worldly pleasures meaningless, and preferred rather to occupy themselves in caring for the poor and for all who were unhappy or in trouble. From our doors nobody was ever turned away. The hospitable board was spread for all comers. Constantly the poor women came to my mother, to whom they poured out their various stories of woe, to be comforted and consoled by her loving helpfulness. Whilst the people called my father the father of the poor, they spoke of my mother as the mother of consolation. I always think of her in those earliest days of my memory as queenly in her dignity and loveliness, full of consideration for everybody, gentle, of a marvellous unselfishness. No action of hers ever failed to show the loving kindness of her pure heart. Her very presence seemed to make an atmosphere of love and happiness wherever she came, enfolding all corners in the fragrance of gentle courtesy. So, even though Nawab, just like Baha'u'lláh, had been born into great wealth and great security, her life in the course of their marriage was going to go in a very different and extremely difficult direction, and she was destined to actually share with her husband decades of exile and poverty and imprisonment as a cost for her dedication to the principles that her husband was teaching. And these were principles such as the oneness of humanity, the unity of all religions, and perhaps that principle that was maybe closest to Nawab's own heart, the advancement and protection of women's rights. And so I would like to sing a song in tribute to Nawab now. And the words of this song were actually written by Nawab and Baha'u'llah's son, Abdul Baha. And I wanted to sing these particular words thinking of Nawab, because I think that in her dedication to spiritual principles and in her devotion to her husband's cause, I think Nawab really exemplified these words. This is called Rely Upon God. Rely upon God, trust in Him, praise Him, and call Him continually to mind. He verily turneth trouble into ease, and sorrow into solace, and toil into utter peace. He verily hath dominion over all things. He verily hath dominion over all things. Rely upon God, trust in Him, praise Him, and call Him continually to mind. He verily turneth trouble into ease, and sorrow into solace, and toil into utter peace. He verily hath dominion over all things. He verily hath dominion over all things. Rely upon God. Rely upon God. Rely upon God. Rely upon God. Rely So another member of Baha'u'llah's family, who now rests on the slopes of Mount Carmel near her mother, is Baha'u'llah's daughter, Bahi'a Khanum, who gave us that beautiful recollection about her mother during those early years of her marriage to Baha'u'lláh. And Bahi'a Khanum was destined for an extraordinary future. She was destined to go down in history as the greatest heroine, the most outstanding heroine of the early years of the Baha'i faith. And she was to be immortalized by a very special name that her father gave her, the greatest holy leaf. And there was actually a time in the early 20th century when the greatest holy leaf became the functional leader of the entire Baha'i world. There was a time in the 1920s when the Baha'i community, this fledgling new faith community, was swept up into what was probably the greatest storm, the greatest trial of its history. It was being ferociously attacked by enemies. And the greatest holy leaf, through this incredible capacity that she had for leadership, managed to steer the ship of this fragile, fledgling community through this storm and bring it to safety. And she actually shielded and protected the entire Baha'i community, not just across multiple countries, but across multiple continents, at a time when that community was being savagely attacked by enemies who were determined to shatter its unity and break it apart. And so I'd like to share with you some recollections now about Baha'u'llah's daughter, the greatest holy leaf. There are some beautiful memories that people have shared, people who knew her. And I think these recollections give us a very special glimpse of this unique form of leadership that she had, which seemed to be simultaneously both very strong and very gentle. And so I'd love to share this with you. These are some recollections from people who knew her, and they're compiled in a really brilliant book called Prophet's Daughter by Janet Khan. Something greater than forgiveness she had shown in meeting the cruelties and strictures in her own life. To be hurt and to forgive is saintly, but far beyond this is the power to comprehend and not to be hurt. This power she had. You were sure that if one tried to hurt her, she would wish to console him for his own cruelty. For her love was unconditioned, could penetrate disguise and see hunger behind the mask of fury, and she knew that the most brutal self is secretly hoping to find gentleness in another. Her balance, sense of fineness and fitness and practical judgment she displayed in creating order and grace in the household, and all the elements that make for well-being she blended in an ambience of harmony. Her strong will was never used to override, and her decided opinions were never pressed upon another. Her ways were gentle. Others might break the shell with a blow. It was for her to unsheath the kernel with infinite care and skill. In her you met with no exactions, no biddance. She beckoned, smiling, and would have no one come heavy-footed or bent to her will. So quietly did she make her influence felt that you were scarcely conscious of its working. So I'd like to sing this next song in honor of the greatest holy leaf. And the words of this song come from a prayer that was written also by Abdul-Baha, who was, of course, the greatest holy leaf's brother. And I think that this prayer is really about cultivating a kind of a deep, loving understanding towards all. And I think that the greatest holy leaf was an outstanding example of that. So this is in tribute to Bahi'a Khanum. the greatest holy leaf. This is called Whatever We Are. O holy Lord, O Lord of loving kindness, we stray about thy dwelling, longing to behold thy beauty, and loving all thy ways. We come with no provision but our sins, with no good deeds to tell of, only hopes, unless thy concealing veil doth cover us, and thy protection shield and cradle us. What power have these helpless souls to rise and serve thee? What substance have these wretched ones to make a brave display? Whatever we are, still are we thine, and what we speak and hear is praise of thee, and it is thy face we seek, thy path we follow. Thou art the Lord of loving kindness. We are sinners and astray and far from home. Withered as we are, revive us with showers from thy clouds of grace. Lowly as we are, illumine us with bright rays from the day star of thy oneness. Wherefore, O cloud of mercy, grant us some drops of rain. O flowering bed of grace, send forth the fragrant breeze. O sea of all bestowals, roll towards us a great wave. O Son of bounty, send down a shaft of light. Whatever we are, still are we thine, and what we speak and hear is praise of thee. Whatever we are, still are we thine, and what we speak and hear ways we seek, thy path we follow. Thou art the Lord of loving kindness. We are sinners and astray and far from home. Okay, so with these little glimpses of these members of Baha'u'llah's family now in our mind, I want us to now retrace the steps of the family, and I want us to go back, way back, to a time when the greatest holy leaf was just a girl of 15 years of age. We're going to go back to that time, which was the time of the very first festival of Riḍván, which took place in the year 1863 in a rose garden on the banks of the river Tigris. And so at this time of the first festival of Riḍván, Baha'u'lláh and his family had gone through a series of major crises that had drastically changed their lives. And these crises had all begun back in their homeland of Persia, which is, of course, modern-day Iran, where 19 years previous to the first festival of Riḍván, a young Persian man who called himself the Bab, which means the gate, had sent what we might call a spiritual shockwave through the Middle East when he claimed that he was essentially a kind of a new prophet who had been sent into the world with a very special purpose, and that purpose was to prepare the way for the coming of the great promised one who is awaited and promised by all of the great religions of the world. And of course, this promise, this anticipation of a divinely inspired figure who will come in the future and will bring about some kind of great transformation in the world, this promise is somewhat mysteriously shared by just about all of the great spiritual traditions of the world. They all carry this shared expectation of a great figure to come. Well, tens of thousands of people across the length and breadth of Persia began to embrace the message of this young man, the Bab, and they began to prepare themselves for the coming of the promised one. And very quickly, the authorities in Persia, both the religious and civil authorities, became extremely threatened by the seemingly unstoppable influence of this young man, the Bab, the gate. And in their fear, in their panic, the Persian authorities unleashed a kind of a tsunami of persecution. They rose up to crush the message of the Bab. The Bab himself, only a young man, was arrested, imprisoned, and publicly executed, shot by firing squad on the orders of the Shah, the king of Persia. Thousands of his followers were put to death, and a group of them were arrested and eventually expelled from their homeland, sent into exile, never to return. And among those followers of the Bab who were expelled from Persia were Baha'u'lláh and Nawab and their young children, who had not only been among the thousands of people who had embraced the message of the Bab, but Baha'u'lláh in particular had become one of the most outstanding leading figures and most outspoken champions of the Bab's message. And now, stripped of their possessions, their home razed to the ground, utterly destroyed, all the securities of their noble families forever gone, Bahá'u'lláh and Nawab and their young children were now forced to settle into a life of exile far from home. And the place to which they were exiled was the city of Baghdad in modern-day Iraq. And in Baghdad, Bahá'u'lláh and the family could, their lives, of course, were forever changed, but they could at least have some respite from the persecution that they were facing back home, and they could, in some sense, start anew. And even though the circumstances of their lives had drastically changed, Bahá'u'lláh and Nawab somehow managed to re-establish that great spirit of hospitality and open-heartedness that they had become famous for back in Persia. They flung open the door of their simple home of exile in the city of Baghdad, and they began to involve themselves in the life of society. They began to open their doors to anyone in the city who was in need of help. They began to care for the poor, to care for the sick, to welcome the distressed, to offer hospitality and help to anyone in need. And their home in Baghdad, just like their home in Persia, soon became a refuge and a haven for the people of the city. And soon enough, hundreds and hundreds of people from all over Baghdad were showing up as if drawn by some magnetic force on the doorstep of the house of Bahá'u'lláh and Nawab in Baghdad. And Bahá'u'lláh himself became a kind of a guide and a teacher for these people. People would come to him and he would sit with them and listen to whatever perplexities or questions were burdening them. And he would offer to them insights and practical principles that could help them to navigate whatever problems and difficulties they were struggling with in their lives. And in fact, I wanted to share with you a short description of some of these principles that Bahá'u'lláh began to teach the people during this time when he was living in exile in Baghdad. This is a short passage that comes from the book God Passes by Shoghi Effendi. The emphasis placed on the principle of non-violence. The stress laid on godliness, kindliness, humility and piety, on honesty and truthfulness, chastity and fidelity, on justice, toleration, sociability, amity and concord, on the acquisition of arts and sciences, on self-sacrifice and detachment, on patience, steadfastness and resignation to the will of God. All these constitute the salient features of a code of ethical conduct revealed during those years by Bahá'u'lláh. And so these principles and teachings and the hospitality received in the family's home really started to have a profound effect on the minds and the hearts of the people of Baghdad. And they grew more and more attached to Bahá'u'lláh and his family as a source of light and wisdom and love in their city. And one way in which Bahá'u'llah's teachings began to spread around beyond his personal interactions with the people in the city was through his writings. During his years of exile, Bahá'u'lláh poured out this overflowing stream of creative, inspired writings, books, letters, prayers, poetry, and these writings began to spread around beyond the city of Baghdad. In fact, soon enough, these writings were spreading like wildfire all over the Middle East and even reaching all the way back to his homeland of Persia. And so for the next song, I'd like to sing for you one example of some of these beautiful poetic writings that Bahá'u'lláh wrote during his years of exile. This is a short poetic verse from a book called The Hidden Words. And this book consists of short verses of spiritual guidance for people. And I think that this particular verse, it's very rich in poetic imagery. And I always think that this particular verse is about the importance of taking care of our heart. This is called Garden of Thy Heart. Oh friend, oh friend, in the garden of thy heart plant not but the rose of love. And from the nightingale of affection and desire, loosen not thy hold. Treasure the companionship of the righteous, and eschew all fellowship with the ungodly. Treasure the companionship of the righteous, and eschew all fellowship with the ungodly. In the garden of thy heart plant not but the rose of love. And so after 10 years of living in exile and of pouring out this abundance of hospitality and of guidance and wisdom for the people of Baghdad, Bahá'u'lláh and his family were struck by another major crisis. In the year 1863, a royal decree arrived from the Sultan of the Ottoman Empire, one of the most despotic, tyrannical rulers of the world, ordering that Bahá'u'lláh and his family were to be exiled a second time. They were to be banished from Baghdad and summoned to Constantinople, the capital of the Ottoman Empire. And because the people of Baghdad had grown so attached to Bahá'u'lláh and the family over these 10 years and had felt themselves so, they had witnessed their society and their lives being so illuminated by the presence of this family, they were broken-hearted at the prospect of their departure, and they felt powerless before this decree of the Sultan. And so all that they could do was to provide a space in the city, a large open-air space, so that Bahá'u'lláh could say goodbye to the people of the city for the last time. And this space was a beautiful, finely cultivated rose garden on the banks of the river that flows through Baghdad, and which is today known as the Garden of Riḍván, the Garden of Paradise. And Baha'u'lláh arrived in this garden in late April 1863, and he and his companions pitched a tent there, and he stayed there for 12 days so that the people of the city could come and could say their last goodbye to him. But on the first of these 12 days, April 21st, 1863, when he arrived in the garden, Baha'u'lláh did something extraordinary. He made a historic announcement that would forever change the course of human history. He gathered around him in the garden those companions who had come with him on that first day to help pitch his tent and prepare for the 12 days ahead. And he revealed to them a secret that he had kept all his life, even though many of his close friends had already silently guessed it. He told them that he was in fact the one foretold by the Bab and promised by the great religions of the world. He was the promised one, and humanity's long wait for peace was finally coming to an end. And he told these friends that he was going to deliver to the world a message, a revelation that would provide humanity with the tools required to actually build universal peace and to bring the world together as one united family. And that day, April 21st, is now celebrated every year by Baha'is and friends of Baha'is around the world as the moment in which the Baha'i faith began, the declaration of Baha'u'lláh. But another very dramatic event occurred on that first day in the Garden of Riḍván, shortly after Baha'u'lláh had made this historic declaration. The river that runs along the banks of the garden began to flood, and the waters rose so high that the people in the city couldn't actually cross the river to join him in the garden on that day. And this included several members of his own family, including Nawab, the greatest holy leaf, and several other members of the family who were separated from Baha'u'lláh by the flooding of the river. And this flood lasted for 8 days, during which the family was separated from Baha'u'lláh by the waters of the river. But on the 9th day, the flood finally subsided, and Nawab and the greatest holy leaf and the rest of the family were finally able to cross the river and join Baha'u'lláh. And that day is the day that we are celebrating today, that 9th day of Riḍván, when the family was reunited in the Garden of Paradise. And I think that, the 9th day of Riḍván really carries this very rich symbolic significance, because, I think that we live in a time when more and more people in the world are experiencing this increasing longing for peace, for unity, to be a longing to be at peace and in unity, not just on a local level, but on an international and planetary level. But at the same time, we are living through a period of history in which the whole world seems to just be engulfed by this proverbial flood of war and conflict and terrorism and religious fanaticism and increasing tensions between different factions and groups and nations who seem to be becoming more and more separated from each other. So many of these things are becoming as barriers that prevent us from being united. And I think that the celebration of the 9th day of Riḍván is almost like a gentle reminder of that moment when the flood subsided and the family were able to cross the river and be with Baha'u'lláh again. I think this is like a reminder of that need, that crying need that we have in the world to find ways to be reunited as one human family. And so I would like to now finish with one last song. But, I said at the beginning that Riḍván is really the story of the moment in which the Baha'i faith began, the declaration of Baha'u'lláh. And so it really represents just the opening chapter of a much bigger story that bursts out of the initial scene of Baghdad and the garden and actually carries this family on a series of further exiles over a period of 40 years, bringing them from one place to another, until eventually it brings them as exiles and prisoners all the way to the slopes of Mount Carmel, in that tumultuous little corner of the Mediterranean, which throughout history has been revered by Jews, Christians, and Muslims alike as the Holy Land. And so, in the spirit of the 9th day of Riḍván, I'd like to dedicate this song to my mother, who all those years before my brother and I were born, climbed Mount Carmel and visited that sacred place where the family of Bahá'u'lláh now rest. So this song is from the writings of Bahá'u'lláh, and I always think this is really an expression of universal hospitality. And so what I would like to do is I would like to consider this song the final song of our live stream on YouTube, and the opening song of our Garden of Paradise devotional gathering on Zoom. So whoever would like to join me in the Zoom meeting, I'd like to invite you to come along into Zoom. And if you'd like to do that, you can click the Zoom link in the YouTube description below this video. And what I'm going to do is I've got 2 cameras here. So I'm going to actually, I'm going to be playing both in Zoom and on YouTube at the same time. So you're welcome to either watch until the end on YouTube, or you're welcome to come into Zoom and we'll have another 20 minutes or so of prayers and songs together in the Garden of Paradise Zoom gathering. So if you'd like to join the Zoom gathering, my friend Gregory is our host, and he will let you in through the waiting room into Zoom. And I will say goodbye after I finish this song. For anyone who just wants to watch on YouTube to the end, feel welcome. So I hope that you enjoyed our journey through the 9th day of Riḍván, and I hope that it gave you a sense of connection to this theme of family reunion on the 9th day of Riḍván. So Gregory, would you like to start letting people into the Zoom gathering? By the way, if you are coming over from YouTube into the Zoom gathering, I just wanted to tell you it's very important that if you enter the Zoom gathering, make sure you close YouTube, because otherwise you'll have double audio. So if you come into the Zoom meeting, you'll see me in the same place because the 2 cameras are here. But just if you come into the Zoom meeting, close YouTube. That's very important for your sound. Okay, so I can see some friends coming into the Zoom meeting now. And I will sing this last song as a tribute to my mother. This is called Blessed is the Spot. And by the way, I also meant to let you know that the Garden of Paradise Zoom meeting is also going to be broadcast live right now on Facebook. So even if you don't want to come into the Zoom meeting, you can also watch it on Facebook, and my Facebook profile link is also in the description below this YouTube video. So feel free to watch from wherever you like. YouTube, Zoom, Facebook, we got it all going on here. Okay, everyone. Happy 9th day of Riḍván. This is Blessed is the Spot. Blessed is the spot, and the house, and the place, and the city, and the heart, and the mountain, and the refuge, and the cave, and the valley, and the land, and the sea, and the island, and the meadow, where mention of God hath been made, and his his praise glorified, glorified, glorified. Blessed is the spot and the house and the place and the city and the heart and the mountain and the refuge and the cave and the valley and the land and the sea and the island and the meadow, where mention of God hath been made, and his praise glorified, 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 and his praise glorified, 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 and his praise glorified, glorified, glorified. Blessed is the spot. Blessed is the spot, and the house, and the place, and the city, and the heart, and the mountain, and the refuge, and the cave, and the valley, and the land, and the sea, and the island, and the meadow, where mention of God hath been made, and his praise glorified, glorified, glorified. Okay, to everyone on YouTube, happy 9th day of Riḍván. Thank you for watching, and I'll say goodbye now. Feel free to come over into the Zoom meeting at any point you like by clicking the link below this YouTube video. And for everyone in the Zoom meeting, we'll begin our Garden of Paradise now.